So my father-in-law used to say, of all of my many amazing, wonderful qualities, do you know the thing I'm most proud of? Of course, we'd say, what? And he'd say, my humility. Right? And it was ridiculous. In today's gospel, we hear Jesus talking about the prayer of the Pharisee and the prayer of the tax collector. Now we have to recognize how shocking this message would have been to the people who heard it. The Pharisees were the religious elite. They were faithful to the law. Whatever the law said, they did just a little bit more. If you asked a Jewish parent, if you were to pick what your child's going to be when they grow up, what would you want them to do? They'd say, be a Pharisee. They were very well respected. And then we have the complete opposite, essentially the tax collector. People saw them as cheats, dishonest. They were despised. And yet, Jesus praised the simple, honest, humble prayer of the tax collector. O God, be merciful to me, a sinner. 8 very simple words. And yet I've heard it called a complete summary of Christian spirituality. The recognition that there is a God. I am not God, but I desperately need God. I am totally, completely dependent on God. And Jesus tells us that the Pharisee leaves the temple the same as he came in, but not the tax collector. The tax collector left justified, changed, transformed. I got a call about a month ago from a gal that I knew, and she asked if I'd be willing to go to the hospital and pray with and for her brother-in-law, who I didn't know. She said that he was dying of cancer. He was hooked up to lots of machines, and the doctors said that at most he just had a few days to live. So not surprisingly, he and the family was really struggling. They were suffering, felt discouraged and defeated. And so I went to the hospital that afternoon and happened to run into a few of the family members in the waiting room. And as I was visiting with them, I was surprised by the fact that they seemed to be in good spirits. And they went on to tell me why. See, between the time that I got that phone call and this time in the afternoon, this gentleman had had a profound experience of Jesus' presence. As he described it, it was just like two friends who were talking to each other. And in that encounter, he was reassured of God's goodness, his mercy, and especially his love. A beautiful, powerful encounter. He also said that Jesus had assured him he was not going to die that day. So when I went into the room, I encountered a man who, even though he was dying, was at peace. He was hopeful. He was filled with joy. And And so we did prayers of healing and comfort, but we also did prayers of thanksgiving. That in the midst of great suffering, God made his presence known to this man. And the interesting thing is, it didn't just impact that man. It impacted his suffering family. It impacted me. And I didn't even know him. Probably about 5 days later, I ran into a couple of his family members. And I asked how he was doing, half expecting them to share that he had passed. And they said, "You wouldn't believe it if we told you. The doctors are completely mystified. He's no longer hooked up to any machines. And he's either being released that day or at the latest the day after." This man was not completely cured. He's still in the dying process. But this man was healed spiritually. Through an encounter with Jesus, he was changed. He was transformed. And so you may be saying to me, Deacon Doug, what does this have to do with me? A dying man, the Pharisees, the tax collectors. What's the deal? Well, remember what Jesus said in the gospel. That the Pharisee left the temple in exactly the same way he came in. And more often than not, at least for me, when I leave the church doors, I'm not changed. But I don't believe that's what God desires for us. If we approach him with a simple, honest prayer, 40 minutes from now, when we walk out those doors, we can be like the tax collector who was different, who was changed, who was transformed.